Nearly 200 years of British colonial rule of India ended in 1947. Perhaps the most lasting legacy is the English language, which continues to play a central role in many areas of Indian life. However, at the time of independence, there was a feeling among some groups in India that English should be rejected as the language of the colonizer.
They associate language with also control and power. As long as the colonial rule was there, their intention was to throw out English along with the English rulers, because they associated English language with those rulers. Of course, that's a very short-sighted policy now. Now, if we try to throw English out, it's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
The attempt in 1947 to establish Hindi as the principal language was highly controversial, and in many parts of southern India, like here in Bangalore, Hindi was regarded as the language of the north.
In the Constitution of India, we don't have a national language defined. It is stated that both Hindi will be the official language of the Union, and English will be used as the associate official language for the Union. And it was also decided that English will continue in India for at least 15 years before the Parliament decides, to phase it out, if there is the possibility of Hindi emerging as a major language. But in 1964, when these things were being thought about, it was also discovered that English cannot go that easily. It was decided that every state will be given the freedom to legislate on what its official language should be. So it was as if English never left India.
One of the areas of Indian life which is still dominated by the English language is the legal system. All legal writings and most court proceedings are in English.
Now we are saying that they do not have title, therefore they could not have filed the present suit.
Yes.
What is their answer to that in the objections?
Nothing.
At this legal practice in Bangalore, even though the local language is Kannada, English is the language in which they work.
The legacy of colonialism is very important in the legal system. English language is a very important factor because in India you have different states that speak different languages, and each of these languages have different dialects in them. Now, if I were to go to the Supreme Court with a case and argue it in my vernacular language, the justice sitting up there wouldn't understand what I was speaking of. Therefore, now what English does is it unifies us, brings in a uniform system of language by which all of us address the courts.
The written statement is only by way of defense.
Suppose if he wants to amend the suit now to incorporate this 24,000 square feet, that is changing the nature of the roads.
Exactly. Everything is in English. The citations are in English. We argue in English language. We did not develop any law on our own. We simply adapted what the English introduced to us. For over a period of more than 200 years they ruled here. So those were the laws which were continued. In fact, our constitution itself was drafted in English. The Constitution of India is drafted in English. So right from the beginning, like I said, I'm not very fluent because of my medium of education was English when I was a kid. In college I studied in English. So if you ask me to argue a case in Hindi, I can't do it for more than a minute. Because I think in English, my thought is in English, because it's my mother tongue, virtually my mother tongue now.
I would say, personally, I'm more comfortable conversing with people in English than in conversing with people in Kannada, being my vernacular language. In fact, my friends state that my vernacular language is really lousy.
Although these lawyers are fluent in the English language, many of their clients are not, which puts them at a serious disadvantage if they have to go to court.
I have basically from all stratas of the society, the clients visit me. So there are certain clients who, it depends basically on their education also to an extent. So when they have studied in the local schools here and they are from the mediocre families, they speak in the local language. But then whatever the proceedings we do in the court regarding them, they are in English, which I have to then explain to them. I'm talking of people who have not studied more than higher, who have not gone above the school level.
Yes, it is a challenge when it comes to dealing with cross-examinations or arguments that are addressed in vernacular languages and then are translated into English, or where arguments and cross-examinations are given in English and then translated into vernacular languages. Where all these are used at the stage of final arguments, and when someone's trying to explain to the judge as to how it was elicited, it becomes really difficult to explain to the judge as to what the real meaning was. Because I could say what the meaning really meant, and my learned friend across the table would say, no, it did not. And there are a lot of case laws recorded in the Indian judiciary which deal only with this aspect of translation.
English also plays an important role in the Indian press. English language newspapers, first established under colonial rule, are widely read today.
Deccan Herald was started in 1948 by my grandfather, Mr. K.N. Guruswamy. He started two newspapers. One is the Deccan Herald, and the other is the Indian language Kannada paper called Prajavani. So the English paper at that time was a prestigious thing to start just after independence, and it was a language of the British at that time and the upper class Indians.
You know, during British time you had English newspapers produced for them and produced for the elite that depended on them. You know, that elite which sustained the colonial rule in this country. So, you know, basically English language newspapers were for them, not for the masses here. So, you know, obviously during the British period, you know, vernacular language newspapers were not encouraged. But if it had been encouraged, if there had been circulation, education, you know, backed by education, probably Britishers would have found it difficult to sustain their rule until 1947.
We have a story of the British Prime Minister coming to India, to Bangalore today. I think we should cover it well tomorrow and the day after.
We have already assigned that to.
English language newspapers reflect a social divide, and they may even reinforce it. They are mainly read in urban areas and cater for an English-speaking elite. Their style of reporting is different from the vernacular press, which tends to focus more on local news.
The English language paper is a bigger paper in terms of pagination, and we have more reports from all over the country. So, and the readers of the English newspapers are more educated and they expect better content. The English language papers right across the country are mainly in the big cities. In the rural areas, it's the Indian languages. In North India, it's Hindi. And in other places, it's local. In Bengal, it's Bengali. In Tamil Nadu, it's Tamil. So, and all the language papers are more local.
The English language also plays an important role in the education system in most Indian states. In Bangalore, private schools generally teach in English, while state schools are more likely to teach in the local language. An attempt by the state government to install Kannada as the medium of instruction in all schools failed.
What is your observation? The set of natural number, set of whole number and the set of integer. How you are going to express the relationship of these three?
N is the subset of W and W is the subset of Z.
Very good.
School managements refused to teach in Kannada because they said we have got English medium schools and we have admitted students because they want to learn English. We can't force them to learn Kannada. The government said, well, Kannada is the state language. They said, we don't care. We don't care if it's a state language. You can teach Kannada as just one of the languages.
Attitudes to the English language in India have changed over time. Whilst there was opposition to English in the 1980s and 90s, now it is more commonly seen as a language of opportunity.
I think there were negative attitudes to English. I remember some movements within English departments, actually, where there was an argument which was called nativism, which was taking the rounds in the 80s and 90s, where people thought that the best way to decolonize was to stay away from the English language. And at that point, English was identified as a colonizer's tongue. But the whole thing is so complicated when you actually try to analyze as to what really happened during that time, because many of those people who were part of this decolonization strategy were also people who were bilingual intellectuals. So they had got the best of English and the local language at some point during colonial times. So there was active resistance to it. And many of the sections which were disadvantaged fought against the nativists and decided that they want the medium of instruction to be in English in all colleges.
My affiliation to English, as many people of my generation, is a very close affiliation. And we like the language. I don't feel apologetic because I talk in English, as many Indians want to do now. They're all the people who came after independence. They say, look, why are you talking an alien language? I tell them, I don't think it's alien at all.
Until about 25, 30 years ago, people would have seen it as a language more in a negative sense. That it's, we were forced to learn the language because the Britishers were here. It was not said so, but then, there was that, with the British legacies in this country. I mean, language is the most important legacy of the Britishers. But today, over the last 20 years, you have a globalizing, situation on the economic front. And, people have realized that it's a huge advantage, knowing English language, because that's a global language. That's a, language of global communication. And we have that language. And, that's why I think, it's felt that in this changing circumstances, we are sitting in an advantageous position because of our language skill. Yeah. So that way, we are in this country in the last 10, 15 years, certain colonial legacies are being reinterpreted, in a positive light.
It was the people's decision, and I think the people have decided to stay with it. That's how it shows itself. Actually, in a way, you could even say that, there is a rediscovery of English as the language which has to be necessarily pursued if you should have access to a better life.
The English language is a gift, in my opinion. It's not just a gift for me as an individual, it's a gift to the country. And so I always believe, make use of the gift that they left you. Don't worry that it belongs to them. It belongs to us now.